after they started to try to begin to dismantle the entire program that Venezuela has that put in place to evade the sanctions. Now here, we have to reiterate that the sanctions on Venezuela are illegal under international law. They're a collective punishment of civilians. Alex Saab was working to evade the sanctions, to overcome the sanctions, and now, because of US pressure, the authorities of Cape Verde have detained Alex Saab. So he's basically in jail for helping to feed the Venezuelan people. He was named a diplomat in 2018 and played an instrumental role in helping Venezuela overcome the sanctions by working out trade deals with, Turkey, Iran, several other countries. In fact, he was on his way back from a trade mission to Iran, refueling in Cabo Verde when he was illegally detained. And I say illegally because, first of all, he's a diplomat. Secondly, there was no arrest warrant. Thirdly, the authorities of Cape Verde said that there was an Interpol notice. Except when you look at the Interpol notice, it was released the day after he was arrested. So it was an ex post facto thing. Alex Saab has been tortured in prison. He's a cancer patient who was denied medicines and treatment. And it's a horrible case that's gotten almost no publicity in the media. ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, has called for his release. The United Nations Human Rights Commission has called for not extraditing Alex Saab. The Venezuela's own National Assembly, when it was controlled by the opposition, they investigated Alex Saab and they exonerated Alex Saab. The Swiss authorities investigated Alex Saab for 3 years and they found no evidence, and so they dropped the investigation. The only one still investigated Alex Saab are the United States, the Department of Justice, as part of this hybrid war in Venezuela, because their feeling is if they can take Alex Saab down, then they can bring down the network that Venezuela has been using to overcome the sanctions, to feed the Venezuelan people, to keep gasoline flowing, and to basically have products of first necessity out available for the people. I'm going to read a few quotes from Alex Saab from letters that he's managed to smuggle out of prison. So Saab has denounced being tortured. He writes, "The United States has 4 employees who enter my cell every night and beat me to make false statements against Maduro. I have been tortured to testify against Nicolás Maduro and sign my voluntary extradition to the United States." Just last week, after the Constitutional Court of Cabo Verde gave the green light for his extradition, Alex Saab wrote the following: "I remain confident that I will prevail in my battle against this legal overreach for political motives by the United States. The false evidence does not matter, neither does the political pressure applied by the United States, nor the scope of the morally corrupt conspiracy in Cabo Verde with its new colonial masters. I will not capitulate. To my friends, to my family, and to the Venezuelan people, I say this: I am a patriot and grateful son of Venezuela. I will never betray the Bolivarian Republic, President Maduro, or the brave people of Venezuela. With the strength I draw from knowing that I am completely innocent of these false accusations by the United States, I hope to return to Venezuela." So here we have a clear victim of lawfare, a political prisoner. Even the U.S. itself has dropped 7 of the 8 charges in his extradition. Now they're just charging him for conspiracy. Conspiracy to what? Conspiracy to undermine the U.S. hybrid war in Venezuela, which of course is no crime. It actually should be the duty of every Venezuelan to stop this craziness that the U.S. has embarked on for the past 20 plus years. Free Alex Saab!
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 Now I'm going to invite Max Blumenthal to speak. Or Anya Parentville.
Well, Leo covered.
Anya Parentville from the Gray Zone.
All right, thanks, Leo. I think you covered the basics of Alex Saab's case very succinctly, and I just hope that people driving by will actually take the time to look up this case, because I know everyone here knows what we're talking about. But there's a theme that we've talked about at the Gray Zone when covering Alex Saab's case that runs through, especially here when you think about what's happened recently with Julian Assange, another person who stood up in the face of U.S. empire and as a result has been kidnapped, essentially. International law violated when they went into the Ecuadorian embassy, dragged him out in London. and have been holding him in a prison. It's very similar to what we now see faced by Alex Saab, all for the so-called crime, as Leo said, which should actually be the duty of any Venezuelan, to try and feed the people of that country as they face a historic and unprecedented blockade. I've been in Venezuela and seen the results of Alex Saab's work. When around Christmas time, my friends who I was staying with in Caracas were receiving their clap boxes. They were receiving their Christmas ham. Everyone who participates in CLAP, or the 6 million families who are part of CLAP, actually would get a free Christmas ham from the government. I've seen the products in the CLAP boxes, including olive oil or oil from Turkey. These are the kinds of goods and the kinds of products that Alex Saab helped secure for his country, thanks to the fact that countries such as Turkey, Iran, and other allies of Venezuela have stepped forward to help alleviate the suffering in that country. And it's just a shame, I think, that we don't hear enough about Saab in the United States. Again, the fact that the Interpol warrant came out after Cape Verde had already arrested Alex Saab tells us that it was the United States that was behind this unlawful and unjust imprisonment. And when I spoke with his lawyer, Femi Falana, who represents him, works with him in Africa, he spoke about the difficulty that Alex Saab has faced due to the fact that he was cut off from his family, and he has been cut off from his family during his time detained. In fact, both of his parents died of COVID over the past year while he was detained, and he didn't get to bury his own parents, neither his mother nor his father, due to the fact that he was in Cape Verde, cut off from his family. He has 5 children, a wife who he's not been able to see. So anyone with children, anyone with family should sympathize with his plight. And honestly, the Cape Verdean government should just be ashamed to be working as a tool of the United States. When you have your fellow African nations through the ECOWAS court demanding that you release this man because the United States essentially pressured you just to act as its hand in Africa, and you are turning your back on your fellow Africans, you're turning your back on the rest of the international community that is crushed by this imperial power of the United States. And I think everybody here is taking note. People in the US are taking note, people around the world are taking note that Cape Verde has reduced itself to this shameful tool. I mean, how humiliating, how shameless can you be in acting in this way? And so I want to take the opportunity to address everyone inside there, if there is anyone, that shame on Cape Verde, shame. I'll leave it there for now. I don't know if you have anyone else who wants to have up.
Does anyone else want to speak?
We're on 30 seconds.
All right, so I mean, one thing we have to recognize is that Cape Verde has come under enormous pressure from the U.S. government over this Alex Saab case. But you know what? Every single Caribbean country came under enormous pressure, much more pressure by the U.S. when it came to Juan Guaido, and almost every single Caribbean country held out against that pressure. So I question why Cape Verde hasn't been able to hold out. In fact, actually, in the waning days of the Trump administration, I don't know if you all remember this, but there were Iranian warships sailing around Africa. In response to that, Trump actually deployed a Navy ship to just outside Cape Verde, fearing that there was going to be some sort of jailbreak. Well, that wasn't going to happen because, Venezuelan officials, unlike the United States, they actually respect international law. And they don't use coercion or the threat of force to try to push countries to act how they want.
And it costs taxpayers like millions a day.
Exactly. I mean, this is money from the U.S. that is going, from U.S. taxpayers, that is being used to pressure a third country where we have actually no interest. The U.S. people have no interest in Alex Saab. This is all part of the U.S. hybrid war, part of imperial hegemony and the attacks on Venezuela that we want no part of.
Shame on Cape Verde. Shame on Cape Verde. Shame on Cape Verde. Shame on Cape Verde. What was the total of the loan that Cape Verde received just prior to Alex Saab's detention? Do you know the sum?
I don't know the sum.
I think it was, a substantial portion of that country's, accounted for a substantial portion of that country's GDP. So Cape Verde, in chasing this loan, has been reduced to a complete tool of the U.S. regime, the world police. And I just wanted to quickly highlight the cases of several other people who have been essentially kidnapped under orders from the U.S. regime, and now its de facto leader, Tony Blitzkrieg. There's someone you may not have heard of. I actually hadn't heard of him until the Gray Zone. I received a draft about him from our friend Stansfield Smith, who's a great anti-war activist based out of Chicago. Moon Chul-myong is a North Korean businessman who's actually been extradited to the United States after he was captured in Malaysia. And what was Moon Chul-myong doing? But the same exact thing as Alex Saab, which was securing goods to provide for the people of DPRK, what we know of as North Korea, a country where, according to the UN, at least 8,000 people died as the direct result of U.S. unilateral coercive measures in 2018 alone, many of them pregnant women. Just excess deaths from deprivation because they cannot obtain medicine and food. I know that this fraudulent dissident, Yeonmi Park, is running around saying that rats eat people's eyes out in North Korea and so on. I don't know if anyone saw her on Joe Rogan. The reality is, those people are being starved by the U.S. regime based right here in Washington, and the business people who are trying to feed their countrymen, like Moon Chul-myong, are being imprisoned by the United States for that crime alone. So what we see is a standard being set by the United States where anyone can be kidnapped who is not a citizen of the United States and brought here and imprisoned for violating what Tony Blitzkrieg, the Secretary of State, calls the rules-based order. And what is the rules-based order? Well, just ask John Gotti, just ask Tony Soprano, just ask Pablo Escobar. It's we make up the rules, and anybody who doesn't follow them pays the price. It's mob rule. It's the same mob rule that has seen Meng Wanzhou, the CFO of Huawei, a Chinese tech firm that was seen as a crucial competitor to the U.S. big tech firms that essentially control the U.S. economy and government. When she was detained under orders of the country just to the north, I can barely call it a country, that the U.S. has effectively annexed. It's called Canada. And Meng Wanzhou is in prison just because the U.S. wanted to ramp up the pressure on China. She's collateral damage of the new Cold War. She's not a citizen of Canada. She's not a citizen of the United States. And they have essentially kidnapped her. And China, with China, you're playing with the big boys. They're not just going to lie down anymore. That's why the two Michaels, have you all heard of the two Michaels? Michael Kovrig and another Michael have been actually detained by China, and there is credible evidence that these two were spies, were actual intelligence agents. So, when you start playing with the big boys in this global power competition and kidnapping people, you put your own people at risk. They were working for US-based NGOs, taking photographs of sensitive Chinese military technology and material, and they are now being held in China. So that's payback. And then we have Julian Assange. Julian Assange is a citizen of another country that we can barely call a country anymore. It's called Australia. I put that in fear quotes because I would hate to be in Australia right now, because if I was there, I'd actually have to ask government permission to just leave the country. That's what we used to, demonize and mock the so-called totalitarian states for doing, but now they're doing it because of an airborne respiratory virus. Shows how thin the underpinnings of liberal democracy in the NATO Five Eyes states really are. And Julian Assange, I mean, what has his government done for him? Have they ever said a word for him as he was kidnapped? Did they do anything to stop literal CIA assets from UC Global, the Spanish security firm, from plotting to poison him, from plotting to kidnap him, from surveilling him, from subverting Ecuadorian intelligence, taking over the camera system of the Ecuadorian embassy, violating the diplomatic sanctity of Ecuador's sovereignty in order to set the stage for Julian Assange's kidnapping by British police? The first time I've seen anything like that in my lifetime. Julian Assange is now in maximum security prison in London, a country where he is not a citizen, and he is facing extradition. And there have been protests, by the way, at the home here of Attorney General Merrick Garland. Remember Merrick Garland? He was like the guy Obama appointed to not be a Supreme Court justice. Merrick Garland lives just up the street, and I think we should be, they're not protests, they're vigils. They're just saying this is illegal under international law. I don't know what US law we can claim as precedent for calling for Julian Assange's extradition. The whole case is falling apart. Siggy the hacker, the key witness against Julian Assange, has admitted that he lied in order to get out of a child molestation prosecution, and that Bill Barr, the former Attorney General, actually helped a child molester get out from being prosecuted in order to nail their top target, Julian Assange, who Joe Biden has labeled a digital terrorist. We should be a part of those vigils. We should keep the pressure on about Julian Assange. This is all part of one global regime that takes anyone who is a threat to it, whether they are a citizen or not, and kidnaps them and tortures them until they can achieve their goals. And so we're here for Julian Assange. We're here for Mun Chol Mong. We are here for Meng Wanzhou, and we are here for Julian Assange because we are here. I said Julian Assange twice. We are here. Sorry, I just love the sound of my voice so much. We are here because we're here for international law. We're the moderates. We're the ones who believe in the law. We believe in the law-based international order, not the rules-based order made up by whatever mob boss gets appointed president here. So let's keep the pressure up. Let's be up in Merrick Garland's grill. Let's continue to stand up for the most basic thing holding the world together, because what the U.S. regime wants is law of the jungle, mafia rule, and we're what stands between that. We're what's standing in the way of that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Max. Up next we have Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Cooking.
So I wanted to say something about Cape Verde, because I actually lived there back in 1979, before some of you were born. And it's extra sad that Cape Verde is doing this, because the head of what was once Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau, the political party that was trying to gain independence from Portugal, was led by a very, very famous revolutionary theoretician, writer, Marxist named Amilcar Cabral. If you haven't heard of him, look him up and read some of his writings. In Africa, he would be on a level of Che Guevara or Frantz Fanon. It gives me chills just to think about his legacy and how much it has been overturned by the government now of Cape Verde, because his whole thing was resistance to imperialism, and that his whole life struggle was about independence for African nations, independence from Western imperialism. And he was revered and continues to be revered by people all over Africa as being a Pan-Africanist, as being a revolutionary, and as being a guiding figure in the struggles against colonialism. And so when I lived there, I lived in the Guinea-Bissau part of Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, when they were connected. And we would go under trees in the afternoons. He died in 1973, and read his writings because they so inspired people in their struggle post-colonial to build up independent, strong African states. So I think when we go to deliver this letter here, we should tell them how much we are inspired by the words and the works and the political party that led to the independence for Cape Verde, how much it means to the people of Africa and the people of the world, Cape Verde's struggle for independence, and how they should be honoring the legacy of Miguel Cabral by not giving in to U.S. imperialism and extraditing Alex Saab.
Yeah.
Thank you, Medea. And just one final thing before we hand over this letter. You know, the Venezuelan government and the radical right, the extreme far right opposition have been holding talks in Mexico, you know, every few weeks. The last ones were a couple of weeks ago. And it's been coming under fire, coming under threat. So you had for the former president of Colombia, Alvaro Uribe, basically denouncing these talks and saying that really what should be on the table is Maduro's resignation. That's not on the table, and presidential elections in Venezuela are scheduled for 2024. You had McCall, Representative McCall, who's I think the ranking Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, say the same thing, basically, that the talks should be about new presidential elections. They're not going to be about presidential elections. You had James Story, who was the former Chargé d'Affaires of the United States in Venezuela. He said that the U.S. should sanction Venezuela more if the negotiations aren't successful. And what's interesting is that just a couple of days ago, it might have been yesterday actually, the Venezuelan government announced that Alex Saab is now going to join the negotiating team on behalf of the government, the team that's negotiating the sanctions issue, because he's an expert on these sanctions. And he's an expert on how the sanctions have impacted the people of Venezuela and how the Venezuelan government has been able to overcome the sanctions. So now he's becoming a kind of an interesting piece in this dialogue between the opposition and Venezuelan government. And that's even more reason for the authorities of Cape Verde to release Alex Saab, to free him and to not extradite him. Because if his release makes it even just a little bit more likely that Venezuela is going to have peace in the near future, then absolutely it's something they have to do. Thank you everyone so much for coming out here today. Medea has a letter right now in her hands. If anyone would like to sign it before we attempt to hand it over to the authorities of Cape Verde, please do so. And one last chant. Free Alex Saab! Free Alex Saab! Free Alex Saab! Free Alex Saab! Free Alex Saab!
Free Alex Saab! Free Alex Saab!
Thank you.
Free Alex Saab!
All right.
Let's lay this down. Walk that way. Oh, I'm gonna walk that way. I'm gonna lay it down. Lay it down. Okay, drop it. Drop it.
Maybe like a group picture or something. I am.